Welcome back to the Terrace. Hit the like buttons and subscribe right now. The Premier League's independent key match incident panel, bloody mouthful, has ruled the referee and VAR were correct to award Newcastle's winning goal against Arsenal. They have also concluded that Kai Havertz and Bruno Guimaraes should have seen red, which changes the landscape of the game massively. If Kai Havertz is sent off, maybe Bruno doesn't lose his head. But then maybe it's harder to break Arsenal down and Newcastle don't win. The game was ruined by poor officiating and incorrect use of VAR. But if I'm being honest with you, there was no way they were going to rule in Arsenal's favour over the goal. The fact they are still stating that there was no evidence of a foul, no evidence of a handball, no evidence of offside, no evidence that the ball went out, in my personal opinion, is absolute nonsense. Nonsense. Potentially with the ball not going out, yes. But the offside, we all saw it hit the arm of Joel Linton, hit his leg, and then roll to Gordon. You don't even need lines because they're both players are behind the goalkeeper, which means you need two defenders to be there for it to possibly. It's just offside by default. You don't need evidence of that as long as the ball came off Joel Linton, which we see it do. We clearly see it hit his arm, and we clearly see him push the guy in the back. But with the way the media turned on Arsenal, with the way the media went for them, ravished them, ripped them apart limb from limb, this was always going to be the case. Of course, in the other stories from this panel, Wolves, for instance, because there was no media attention on Wolves, nobody cared about Wolves. I went through all the big corporate channels. Nobody was talking about it. The only channel that mentioned it was us, that I looked at. I'm sure there's other independents that did and Wolves channels that did. 2 weeks running, they've ruled in that favor. 2 weeks running, they've said, "Oh, Wolves were robbed." But of course, it's easy. There's no media attention on it. Nobody's calling out Wolves for complaining about it. But because Arsenal were lambasted, they were by Gary Neville and by Jamie Carragher, they were called dangerous. They said it was overstepping the mark. Jamie Carragher's actual words, as you can see here, they overstepped the mark. They went, in fact, what was his actual words? That Arsenal statement and complaint from their manager about officials on the Newcastle goal is way over the top. So, of course, they were never going to rule on this panel in Arsenal's favour, because then that opens a can of worms. And what the media have done and what rival fans have done have set back the process of getting more consistent and or better decision making. That's my reading of this situation. Because also, where's the independent panel? Why haven't they mentioned the Udogie two-footed tackle? I haven't mentioned that. I know he got sent off later in the game, but they haven't mentioned that as an example. There's no mention as to, in their breakdown, as to why this ball was conclusively not out. Sorry, there was no conclusive evidence that it was out, but they haven't cross-referenced it with the other famous example of Rashford's as to why this one was. And this is the problem that we face. There's no talk about other decisions that weren't given because there's no media attention on them. They can just brush it under the carpet. Nobody is asking questions. And even when it comes to these statements, Howard Webb's not appeared on TV. No audio has been released, and they can get that pretty damn quickly. They're probably editing out bits they don't want us to hear. And they are looking at it, right, we have to, and this happens in the corporate world all the time. We've got to take a few losses. We've got to take a few blows. We'll admit we got the red cards wrong because it's one each. We'll admit about the Wolves situation because that shows like we're integral. But no one cares. There's not a big enough fan base of Wolves for anyone to give a damn. And I mean that with respect to Wolves. But when it comes to the big decision we got wrong, we're going to ignore it. When it comes to all the big decisions they've got wrong against Man United, you hear nothing. Offside goals, penalties not given. It's crazy. And refereeing is becoming a joke. And it isn't just in the Premier League. This is in Europe as well. I've seen no explanation, no media outlets, no debates whatsoever as to why UEFA did not issue a red card for Endo, but did for Marcus Rashford. And this should be something the mainstream media is using its power to call out. And yes, we can get ex-pros to give us their opinions and say whether or not it is they think one is a red and one isn't. That's great. But they should be using the platform to call out the referees, call out the associations, to call out the governing bodies and the independent panels, and not just to say we agree or disagree with the decision. What does that mean? Break it down as to why. And I'll go back to an example here. They have said there's no conclusive evidence there was a push in the back. Well, do you know what precedent they have set? This is back to the Arsenal game. Do you know what precedent they have set here? It now means that every time a ball's crossed into the box, I want to see every attacking player putting his hands in the back of the head, back of the neck, upper part of the back of every defender. Just do it. You cannot be penalized now. There's now a precedent set that they can't tell how much of a foul it is. Everyone's got to start doing it. Everyone, by the way, has got to start jumping into two-footed tackles because they've not even mentioned this as an example. So two-footed tackles and pushes in the back are now acceptable. But this is why I know it's a pantomime. This is why I know it's a nonsense. Because the inconsistencies, even on their statements, are an absolute abomination. They're an abomination. And some will say, oh, Terry's just sticking up for Arsenal again. This is nothing to do with Arsenal. Because last night I was sticking up for Liverpool. I'm not a Liverpool fan. The night before I was sticking up for Man United. I'm not a Man United fan. And I want to get back to just focusing more on the football. But I can't do that. And I don't believe any football fan should either. That's what they want. They want to bore you or frustrate you into submission. Oh, let's just go back to watching football and forget the inconsistencies. No. I want a detailed explanation as to why a two-footed tackle is allowed when the law states you can't do it. I want to know why Rashford's ball was conclusively out and Newcastle's ball wasn't. What's the difference? What have you seen? Educate us so we're not frustrated. We're not stupid. We're not 3-year-old children. We can understand. We can absorb this, learn and develop our own minds when it comes to football. Don't treat us like idiots. But I don't believe they are treating us like idiots. I believe they know they've made mistakes, but they don't want to open up a can of worms. That's why they've ruled in favor of the Newcastle goal standing. Because what will now happen, as sure as eggs are eggs, is rivals will go, see, Arsenal moaning for nothing. And they're just accepting what's being said. This independent panel that's probably made up of ex-referees and their friends, the same as the guys on television. It's all one big club. No independence to it at all. It's a nonsense. Would you trust a jury if you're up on a charge and it was family members and friends of the alleged victim that were judging your fate? Would you trust it? I certainly wouldn't. And this is what will happen now. Arsenal will get bantered. Same as Man United got bantered on Wednesday night. The same as Liverpool got bantered last night. I got called boring and stupid. And it's getting old now, Terry, you're calling out refereeing decisions because fans just want to laugh at each other. And it allows this incompetence to remain. And then you look at things like this from Jamie Carragher. Today, Jamie Carragher has said that I wanted VAR as I wanted the game to progress and get more big decisions right. But it hasn't worked and nobody likes it. VAR is ruining too many games. Its influence needs limiting to goal line technology and automated offsides. This comes a few days after saying the Arsenal statement complaining about these incorrect decisions is over the top. Make that make sense. It's crazy to me. This is what I mean, Kardashian-style drama. Did I not tell you that this exact thing would happen just 3 to 4 days ago? They will go back on their word and start complaining themselves. They'll moan about it when their team gets damaged. They'll moan about it when their team gets robbed. They'll moan about it when their team goes through problems. But then when a rival or a team, I'm going to wind up their fan base here, it's going to be great for television. By the way, Jamie Carragher's words, Richard Key's words, that is what they do. And I understand there's a fun element to it. And I've partaken in that fun. But from my standpoint, where I'm looking at right now, it's damaging football. We saw just last night, Liverpool didn't deserve anything out of the game. They were poor in terms of their performance. But we know that results don't work based on performance all the time in this game. And that is the beauty and the elegance and the ecstasy and the madness and the excitement that surrounds our game. And when your team's in the mud and you win a game that you don't deserve to, it makes you feel okay. But when you've got a good team that's winning trophies and you have a bad game, and you pull it out the bag, there is a buzz and an excitement, and I can't believe we got out of jail. That was stolen from Liverpool last night. The Man United fan in me is giggling. The football fan in me is fuming. This was given as handball, and it goes against the protocol of handball. It goes against the protocol of handball because it hits his arm, then his body, and then clips his arm, which was in a natural position. The still shot makes it look like it isn't a natural position. But due to body mechanics, sometimes you have to put your arm out to the side. You have to control yourself. Just like Maguire's handball the other night. He puts his arm out to the side so he can maneuver his body around the player. Try and play football with your hands by your side and try and get around someone. You can't do it. You need your arm to almost guide you. Your arm is in a natural position. And because of the proximity or a bad deflection, it's now a handball. No, nonsense. It goes against the law of the game. And Liverpool were denied a last-minute equaliser. And yes, it wasn't a final. It wasn't a semi-final. It wasn't a game that was overly pivotal towards their season. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't call the inconsistencies out. There's an expression that I was taught when I was younger that was, if not me, who? If not now, when? And that's how I feel about this situation. If we don't call it out, even in the smallest games or the most minute games, matches that you didn't deserve to win, we are going to see all of our teams at some point or another lose something big because of this incompetency. The clubs need to speak up more. The fans need to speak up more. Rivalry and tribalism needs to be dropped. The craziest thing for me is I'm getting attacked more by Man United fans than I am rivals when I defend Arsenal, when I defend Liverpool, when I defend Chelsea, when I defend Wolves. Then when I defend my club, all those fan bases come at me and say, well, what about my club? My brother saw your comment the other day saying thank you. The tribalism is hurting us here. And I understand it exists and I have it as well. But we have got to work to push through it. Because Howard Webb and these bunch of cowards have not come out and said a word on any of these debacle, this debacle, any of these incidents for a whole week. No audio has been released, which tells me they're covering things up. We've got this independent bunch of clowns that have, of course, ruled out the most contentious decision of the weekend and then given loads of other little ones that nobody really cares about around it. And they still haven't addressed some of the other big concerns, a two-footed tackle, and they've given us no detailed explanation as to why decisions that were made at the weekend are very different from decisions made earlier stages of the campaign. They don't want to educate us because they know they've made mistakes. And that's why the media have played this down this week when Arsenal were complaining. I think they've had a word in their shell. I think the Premier League has said, listen, we're partners here. Please don't go in too hard on them. They have to have done. They have to have done. And now we're never going to get the answers. It's going to be buried and brushed under the carpet again, used as banter, which will then make the clubs who have been hard done by bitter. So when another team gets hurt, they won't say, oh, we've got to stand up together. They'll say, ha ha, I'm glad you suffered as well. And what happens? All the focus goes away from the actual root cause problem. And it just goes back to petty, tit for tat, eye for an eye mentality. So listen, I reject this notion. I reject this bog standard, basic bitch reply from the people that referee and officiate our games, because for me, they know the mistakes they've made. They won't give us detailed explanations, and they're hurting football week in, week out. But the big question is to the football fans watching, are you going to do something about it, or are you going to join them, throw petrol upon the fire, engulf football further, and damage more clubs, more players, more fans, more weekends, and help to continue ruin this beautiful, beautiful